I am Abner, son of Ner, commander of the armies of Israel, and for decades I have served the house of Kish. Being Saul's uncle, I watched him grow up as a boy. I was with King Saul when he first was anointed, then all Israel as the nation unified behind him. I have seen many battles, the rise of David, the fall of Samuel, the fading of King Saul. But that night at Endor, the day at Mount Gilboa, truly marked the end of an era. Samuel was dead. All Israel knew it, but those of us who had leaned on his counsel felt his death the most. With Samuel gone, Saul's confidence faltered. He had expelled the mediums and spiritists from throughout the land in obedience to the law, and I respected him for that. Yet as the Philistine threat grew, so did the king's anxiety. Their forces were now assembled at Shunem, a strategic ridge guarding the Jezreel Valley. It was a place from which armies could sweep north toward Galilee or south towards the Central Highlands. To counter them, our army camped at Mount Gilboa. Its slopes gave us some defensive advantage. Years ago, Gideon and his men had camped here by the well of Harod. But when Saul looked over the Jezreel Valley and saw his ranks, he was afraid. He sought the Lord, but no answer came. Yahweh was quiet. Saul became more and more agitated. He had to talk to Samuel. Saul left our camp at Gilboa quietly and at night. He disguised himself wearing a hooded cloak, hiding his sword beneath common travel garments. He had one purpose in mind: find a witch who could help him talk to Samuel. He had to talk to Samuel. The two officers who accompanied him told me later how paranoid he had become. My Lord Abner, he walked as though he feared even the sound of his own footsteps. Endor was a small, out-of-the-way village tucked beneath the ridge of Mount Morah. Few dared to visit it even in the day. Its Canaanite people were known for ancient traditions and old forbidden practices, witchcraft and sorcery. The Torah was clear that these practices stood in opposition to revelation of God, and sorcerers did not have a right to live. After Saul's purge, most mediums had fled or hidden. The one witch Saul sought lived in a mud-brick dwelling, half underground, built into the slope of the mountain like a burrow. Smoke seeped from the narrow chimney. They had arrived at Endor. Saul knocked at the door. When she answered, she peered out with a hawk-like suspicion. A shawl was wrapped around her head.
Look, you know what Saul has done, she whispered. He has cut off the mediums and spiritists throughout the land. Do you want me to get killed?
She feared death. If she knew she was speaking to Saul himself, she would have fled into the hills. But the king swore, as the Lord lives, no punishment will come upon you. Only then did she let them inside. The inside of the house was dim. On the walls hung dried roots and herbs, wormwood, hyssop, and other plants that smelled of earth. In one corner was a pit dug into the floor, lined with stones blackened by the fire. This was the ritual pit used by ancient mediums. The woman murmured in a dialect neither man recognized, perhaps part Canaanite, part tribal. She sprinkled powders into the pit, and a faint glow rose like foxfire. Saul sat hunched, head bowed, his hands trembling.
Bring up for me the man I shall name to you, he said.
Then he named Samuel. At that, everything changed. The woman suddenly shrieked, saying with angry eyes,
"Why have you deceived me? You are Saul."
How she recognized him, whether by divine revelation, sudden insight, or terror, I cannot say, but something in the room had shifted. The officers, hardened soldiers though they were, told me their skin prickled and their hearts thudded as though an unseen wind pressed against them. Saul begged her, "Do not be afraid. Tell me what you see." Her voice shook as she answered,
"I see a spirit ascending out of the earth."
Saul leaned forward, knuckles white.
"What
Is his form?"
An old man is coming up, and he is covered with a mantle.
When she described the mantle, Saul collapsed to the ground and face buried in the dirt. Saul did not see the prophet, but he heard Samuel's voice. Whether the woman heard it or Saul alone, the men could not fully say. Look first. I am deeply distressed. God has departed from me. Then came Samuel's dreadful reply. Why then do you ask me, seeing the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy? The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to David, the son of Jesse. Tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me. The witch, seeing the king collapse, took pity on him. She knew he had eaten nothing for a day and a night. She prepared a quick meal, a fatted calf, unleavened bread. This was the kind of food reserved for honored guests. Saul ate mechanically, quietly, pondering all that had taken place. Then he rose, shoulder bent, head lowered, and left with his servants, heading back to the camp of the army of Israel. When I heard all this, my heart tightened. This is not the Saul I had known, the king who towered over every other man, who charged the Philistines at Geba, the man who rescued Jabesh Gilead with the fury of a lion. By the time he returned to Gilboa, he was already carrying the weight of his own death. And the next day, the prophecy came to pass. Morning rose crimson, a sky most of us saw as an omen. The Philistines marched forward confidently, their formations disciplined. Historically, they excelled in iron weaponry and chariot warfare, and their warriors from Gath and Ashkelon were seasoned fighters. We Israelites, fighting on foot and mostly with bow and arrow, had the advantage only in the hills where the chariots were useless, but on Gilboa's slopes, their archers were well positioned, a deadly unit trained to weaken enemy leadership before the battle actually started. As the battle commenced, the air was filled with the hiss of arrows. I fought beside Saul as I always had, yet I knew something was wrong. His movements were slow, his shield drooped, and he seemed distracted. Then the archers found their mark. He fell to one knee, blood soaking the earth beneath him. I rushed to him, but he waved me away. He knew the Philistines would soon overrun us. He called to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust it through me, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me and abuse me." But the young man refused to do it. He could not and would not harm the king. Saul looked over at me then, and I saw resignation, not fear. Before I could reach him, he took his own sword and fell upon it. Saul's armor-bearer took his own life as well, and a terrible cry rose from the men as the word spread. King Saul was dead. My heart clenched tight. I had not left his side in decades, and now the armies of Israel were collapsing around us. The Philistines pressed in. Many Israelites fled across the valley. Others fell where they stood. Jonathan, faithful, courageous Jonathan, died with his brothers that day. I saw him fall in the thick of the battle. A sword pierced my soul at the sight. When night finally ended the slaughter, the Philistines desecrated what remained. They cut off Saul's head and stripped off his armor. They fastened his body and the bodies of his sons to a wall at Beth-shean, a nearby city. Saul's head was paraded through the villages of the Philistines and then displayed at Dagon's temple in Beth-shean. I was not there to stop it. Our forces were shattered and scattered. But the men of Jabesh Gilead, whom Saul had rescued in his first act as king, came by the night and took down the bodies of Saul and his sons, and they buried all 4 of them under a tree in Jabesh Gilead. Their bravery honored the memory of the man he once was, the deliverer of their city. I mourn for Saul. I mourn for Jonathan most of all, and I mourn for Israel, now leaderless and vulnerable before its enemies. In my heart, I resolved that day, the house of Saul will not fall while yet I live. Thus began the long struggle that followed, my attempt to hold the kingdom together as the rising power of David, whom the Lord had chosen. But those are tales for another time. Gilboa had broken us. The Philistines thought they had destroyed Israel, but they understand neither our God nor our people. And though Saul and Jonathan lay dead, the house of Kish still had a son, Ishbosheth. To him I gave my allegiance. Jonathan was gone. My heart still bled at his memory, but Israel needed stability. And as the commander of Saul's army, I believed it my duty to raise up what could be saved. News soon reached us that David, son of Jesse, had taken up residence in Hebron, and that his men of Judah had anointed him king. I had long respected David's skill, a warrior of rare talent, a man the Lord favored. Yet I had also seen how Saul's jealousy twisted every mention of his name. For years I held the army together while the king's trust wavered. Now David had a kingdom of his own, and Judah's allegiance was no small matter. Still, Israel is more than Judah. 11 tribes remained, and Saul's dynastic line lived. I could not allow the nation to fragment. So I brought Ishbosheth, Saul's son, the Mahanaim, across the Jordan. It was a secure, fortified city, and there with the elders of the tribes around us, we declared him king over all Israel, excluding Judah. He was 40 years old when he became king, and he ruled Israel for 2 years. Ishbosheth was a weak king, and it was not long until I gave in to the truth. David was the man chosen by Yahweh to rule over all Israel. I had served Saul from the beginning and proclaimed him the chosen of the Lord. I followed him into battle, carried out his commands, and protected his life. Now, I will do the same for King David.
So who was Abner, Saul's general? He was a close family member. According to 1 Chronicles 8:29-33, Abner was an uncle of Saul, while 1 Samuel 14:51 reports Abner as a cousin. Noting Abner's behavior in the biblical text, I chose to report him as Saul's uncle. Abner appears to be older and wiser to me, while Saul was younger and more impulsive. Uncle or cousin, does it matter? What do you think? One thing I could say about Abner, he was loyal, unwavering, obedient, smart, brave. He was all in with Saul. Only problem was, he was supporting the wrong side. He was fighting against God and his will. Whether he thought he was following Yahweh or not, he was out of God's will. Finally, at the end of this portion of Samuel and at the beginning of 2 Samuel, Abner gives in to God's will. David was to be king, not the house of Saul, not Ishbosheth, and certainly not himself. Abner's loyalty switched. to David. How many times have we fought hard for something only to discover that God really wanted the opposite? We cannot assume to know the will of the Lord. We cannot do what seems to us to just be good or even the obvious. I have been known to do this at times. I wanted to save the youth group that God was trying to let die and restart. I wanted to try to fix the problems I saw at the church instead of letting God have his way with them. In the end, Abner submitted to the obvious. It was God's will that David be the next king. He was to be from the tribe of Judah, not from the house of Saul. It was time to switch sides. There's more to the story of Abner to come, as well as Abishai, Joab, Michal, Abiathar, and Ahinoam. Samuel, Jesse, Saul, and Jonathan have died. But new voices emerge in 2 Samuel to tell us about David: Nathan, Bathsheba, Absalom, Joab, Benaniah, and others have their stories to tell. By now, you should have quite a list of things we know about David: his habits, his strengths, and his weaknesses. David wasn't a perfect man. Like all of us, he made mistakes. He forged ahead without checking in with God. He was impulsive at times, but he had an intimate relationship with God. He spent time with God. He fought for God and obeyed God. He wrote beautiful prayers and songs about God. He repented when wrong and made things right. He was anointed by God and walking in his calling. One thing stands out above all the rest. David was a man after God's own heart. Don't miss the next series, David, Anointed King.
Bigger than the heavens, and the lover of my soul.